Hey everybody, we're just getting set up here, making sure this is working. Holy Dinah. Okay, so that's Facebook.
Holy Dinah.
Holy Dinah. What did I do?
What's your language?
Okay, so here's the YouTube version. Maybe I'll share that in something. Oh, we got to share that in Castaways Club.
Yeah, you can send me the. Where did you?
Here, I'll put it in Skype chat. There we go. There's the YouTube. And I'll put it in here. Ever wonder what it's like to work with a podcast editor? There we go. And let's
Discord.
Let's see if this actually tweeted. Yeah, because that was weird last time. It didn't
tweet.
Didn't tweet to Twitter, which is usually where most of these get listened to. Yeah. Hey, Michael Dorinda. Michael's a nice guy, Chris. He's in Australia. He does the Laravel News podcast.
So you're all Laravel all the time now.
Oh yeah, I'm so in, but
do they know that you don't actually know anything about code? They still let you in?
Yeah. I mean, they shouldn't. They totally shouldn't. See, this didn't publish to. We're not on Twitter.
Oh, like Periscope didn't.
It's sending. Yeah, Periscope is not sending. And I probably can't turn this off and on again, can I?
You on Restream? That's on Restream, right?
Yeah. Let me see if I can just flip a switch and get.
You can if you're on a paid plan.
Yeah.
Did you do the AppSumo?
Oh, I'm on a paid plan. No expense spared over here.
John didn't ex-nay the.
Well, no, this is the
budget.
advantage of having still my own Canadian company.
Right. Oh yeah. I can sneak it through.
Yeah, I just pay for everything on my own. This is so okay. I'm just gonna share the YouTube. No Periscope. I'll do it this way because I don't want to mess around with this forever.
Periscope's good for like people quickly checking it out and being aware of what it is, and I think like YouTube, Twitch, whatever later is like for the people who are actually invested.
Totally.
Willing to follow along.
Yeah, and I mean usually I get more views on Periscope than anything else, but
I think they pump their numbers because I don't know.
Oh really? You don't think it's real?
Well, I'm sure it's real in the like that person checked it out, but then because the numbers I get on there are way higher than anywhere else, but like I don't see any sort of engagement afterwards. Like I think it's people driving by on Periscope or something. I don't know.
Okay, I just tweeted this. You can retweet it if you want. So Michael is editing his episodes himself, which I've done as well. I know what that game is like. What we're going to do is we're going to take you through our workflow, what Chris and I do. This is Chris, everybody. Chris ends.
Hi, everybody.
I should do that again so the video starts nicer. This is Chris ends.
Hi, everybody. Was that my pause? I didn't know my line.
So this is Chris from lemonproductions.ca, and today we're going to show you how he and I work together on the Build Your SaaS podcast. I'm going to show you kind of my side of it, all I have to do, and then I'm going to hand it over to Chris, and he could describe quickly how, what he does on his end. And then I'll show you what we get back from Chris and how basically I used to edit my episodes myself. This has changed everything for me. Now it's just better.
So you'd say hiring me is life-changing.
It has been life-changing. It's true.
Yep.
And actually, if anyone's listening live to this, you can pop in the chat there how long it takes you to edit your episodes. I think I saw a Twitter thread with Marco Arment, and it takes him 2 to 3 hours to edit his episodes. And I've taken that, whatever I was spending, 1 to 2 hours, down to 30 seconds because all it is me transferring files to Chris. So,
And then a tweet.
oh, and then
Or a DM,
I
yeah.
should show you, I should show them that too, how we communicate. All right. So let me show you my desktop here. Hopefully that works. There we go. All right. And actually I got some other garbage on here. There we go. So John and I record in Skype, and I actually usually record video as well. But all Chris wants is, how do you pronounce these? Is it AIFF?
AIFF. I always.
AIFF. And
Yeah.
why do you want those as opposed to MP3, AAC?
So AIFF or WAVE would be like uncompressed.
Gotcha.
MP3 is compressed. So in a perfect world, that's what you want, is like as the highest quality, right? Starting from, rather than like if you compress it to MP3 and then I open it up and edit it a bunch and then compress it again back to MP3, kind of just you're degrading quality along the way.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
lots of people do. I have clients who send me MP3s and it's fine. Like it's not the end of the world, but
Yeah.
just when possible, like if you've got bandwidth and you've got space, which I know you and John both have plenty of, then might as well do it.
Yeah.
Dropbox, like, yeah.
Yeah, it works well. So
Yeah.
I'll export both. I record my side locally and then John's side remotely just as a backup. And then I'll export both of those as AIFFs. And then we have, I'll just back this up here. We have a shared Dropbox folder with Chris. So here's our shared Dropbox folder. And every time we create a new episode, so we just had episode 73, that's the one we recorded, we'll create a new folder, and then we just drop our audio in there. So you can see my audio is 248 megs, John's was 262, and then I also had a clip that I wanted Chris to put in there as well, so I just labeled that clip 01. And that's pretty much it. From this point here, I'll open up Twitter DMs and send Chris a message. I better not show that because there might be some stuff in there that you and I have been talking about.
There's some
that
yeah,
we can't
trade secrets.
that we can't tell people about. But that's how Chris and I talk, is over Twitter DMs, and I'll just DM him and say, hey, the recordings are in Dropbox. We usually record on Thursday or Friday, and the episodes are published on Tuesday. And is that enough turnaround time for you, or are we a special case?
I stay late. This is where I have to embellish to make it sound like I do, like the whatever baking or Rice Krispie squares or whatever. It's like, so then I take it from Dropbox. I have to run through a gauntlet of fire and brimstone just to get to the editor. That takes 2 hours.
Yes.
No. No, that's fairly normal. Like I have varying clients who are like, most people are on a schedule, like they always want to release on a certain day, which is good.
Yeah.
And then, and so then they record obviously in advance of that. And generally, like actually one client I have, they batch record like crazy, like nobody else I know. And it's almost to the point where it's like, there's so many episodes in the can that they have that I have trouble remembering, which one we're on and where we're at. And it's kind of that kind of thing. Whereas for you and John, and then other people like Shop Talk Show and CodePen Radio and stuff, it's much more like they record on the Wednesday and then it goes out on the Thursday or Friday or whatever, similar to you guys. So, yeah, so it's all types.
Yeah. And so I assume when you're onboarding a new client, you just ask them, what's your publishing cadence? And then when do you typically record? Yeah,
exactly. It's sort of, it's a bit of a feeling out process, just like if you're a web designer, maybe you've worked with clients. Each time you take on a new client, you're kind of like, you know what you do, you think you know what they do, and they kind of know what you do, and you're kind of like introducing each other. It's a bit like a first date maybe or whatever, and you're just kind of feeling each other out, seeing what you like to talk about or whatever.
Yeah.
We'll just stop the dating metaphor there, but and then you figure out the cadence and rhythm, and because generally it's like the recording probably takes them, the client or whatever, an hour or two, depending on what kind of show it is. And then generally takes me an hour or two, depending on to edit and all the stuff. So sometimes I'm involved in publishing it as well. And so it's purely just like they record and then they just see the episode appear like on the Monday or whatever when it's supposed to be released. And so,
Yeah.
So yeah, even with some clients, I'm involved with working with sponsors, and sometimes they're too busy. The client is too busy to record the sponsor read, so I'll record the sponsor read even for them, and then put that all together and send it out. So, kind of everything from just quick edits to MP3 to like full start to finish,
Full show notes and everything.
process. Yeah.
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 So I'll show you the way we do it. We just get Chris to edit the show, and so like I mentioned, we have the audio files here. And one more thing before I hand it off to Chris to kind of maybe talk a little bit about how he edits the show. One thing that Chris does help us with a little bit is our local setup. And I know for a lot of folks, this is actually gives them a lot of anxiety. Do I have things set up correctly? Chris taught me this trick where you can't really see my microphone, but it's about a hand width from your microphone. That's how far you should be. And then also we have our audio settings. I'm going through this preamp here, and this is how I have mine set up. And Chris says that's sounding pretty good. We're still trying to figure out my co-host John's audio a little bit, but these are the things we are tweaking over time, and Chris has been great about giving us feedback on that. So Chris, do you want to quickly describe the editing process, or do you think, can you communicate that somehow?
Do I share my screen with you?
This
is all like hastily arranged here, so I don't know.
Yeah, you could share your screen. It'll
see
show
what
up.
Happens. Let's break the internet.
Let's break the internet.
Start sharing. So now you're getting my whole screen?
Yeah. Now I can see everything. I can see. I can see you have a little thing there. I can see. Yep.
Okay. So I've got all your episodes. Like I keep last few episodes, and then there's a Dropbox link, obviously. So I have 73 is what we're on.
Yep.
That's what. So you just dropped that in there yesterday. Yeah. And so basically, I have a. Here, let's go quick. Hopefully, Logic plays along nicely. My computer's getting to that point where it's like starting to show its age.
Well, especially on these streams, it's a little bit unfair because these streams ruin everything.
So yeah, especially when you're trying to like demonstrate audio stuff, and then you've got audio streaming, and Transistor. Just quickly save it because you always save your work, right, everybody?
I should also say that you helped us find our theme music too.
That's actually, I think that was from, I don't know if you'll hear. Do you hear that?
No, I can't hear it.
Yeah, we won't worry about what you're actually hearing, but and I'm just going to drag that in quickly, get that.
That was Music for Makers, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, it was from, you can actually get your own copy of the Transistor or Build Your SaaS intro music.
Yeah,
from a great service.
How I need to what do I have to pay to lock that down?
Yeah, you want to, at some point you want to copyright your sound, right? Your branding.
Yeah, I gotta talk to Logan and say, wait a second.
Yeah. Stop giving this away. I haven't actually heard. It's always like you'll hear it in like the weirdest place, some like random YouTube video. You all of a sudden hear this music, like, why do I know that? I know that from somewhere. It's like because you both use the same library,
Yeah, and there's some songs that you hear constantly, like the same theme music. Everybody has it.
Especially if it was like in the like the iMovie theme library or whatever back in the day. Anyway, so like basically, you guys can't hear it, so we won't worry about too much. But I'm going through editing out. Like if there's often Justin will have a sponsor thing. That's what probably this is like him talking about the first little sponsor. And then John has his probably here. Yeah, so he's actually starting there. So I have to line them up quickly.
Oh yeah, that's another thing that Chris does for us. If you've ever had to edit a multi-track episode, getting it to sync up is, especially if you don't do it all the time, is tricky. And so Chris just takes care of all of that himself. He's syncing up our tracks so that they make sense.
So like, right, I'm zooming in and out, that's where the Magic Trackpad is really handy too. If you're doing any editing at all, the Magic Trackpad apples, I really like for going quickly back and forth from like big to small. So this, like, if you've ever done any sort of video editing, there's keyframing in Logic and audio as well. So that's what's happening here. So the music is fading out.
I should also say, because I used to edit so many of my own episodes, but a lot of this stuff, even that you're doing right now, is the stuff that would give me so much anxiety. Am I leveling things to the right level? Am I, how is this, so whatever settings, I mean, you even have that LUFS monitor there.
Yeah.
Is that the way you say it? LUFS or LUFs?
I've heard it LUFS, but
LUFS,
yeah.
okay. And there's, everyone has their, what do you typically level it out to?
I do -16, but
Okay.
-16 to -18 is sort of what podcasts generally aim for these days.
Yeah.
Ish, depending on which religion you're ascribed to. So
Yeah.
I don't know
think
what
that's the other-
feedback you got.
I think that's no, people have thought our levels are great. I think there's two advantages to going with an editor like you. One, when I was editing it, I was always, every week it was a different, it was leveled to a different level. And so I would have people complain and say, they were batch listening to a bunch of episodes
Right.
and saying, I listened to one and it's fine, and then the next episode blows my eardrums out. So
Yeah.
the consistency for us has been really great. There's actually a few early episodes of Build Your SaaS that I edited, and they're louder than
Right.
than you would have done. So we try not to. Now we just have Chris edit every episode because the consistency is so nice.
And that is certainly a big thing to consider. Like, obviously, everybody, you got to do what you're capable of. You have time for. You have money to do. Like, all those things. That's all factors when you're putting together a podcast. And so, initially, when you start out, you're doing it. You don't even know, and then you get your first complaint, or maybe you go try and put it in your car stereo. And you're like, I can't even turn my stereo loud enough to hear myself. What's going on? That kind of stuff. And so, you live and learn, and And luckily, everybody's paying $0 for the podcast, so they can't complain too much that they're not getting their money's worth. But when you're representing a brand or whatever, you want to put up a quality product. So, but yeah, and then even a little secret, like wherever Justin says it here, this is Transistor or whatever. I don't think I can send. Actually, if I fiddle enough, I know I could send you audio, but I'm not going to break things.
Yeah, I have a little.
So like he says right here,
Transistor.
transistor.fm.
Yeah.
And then I just replace that there. So if you listen, it's actually the same. I don't remember what episode that was way back when.
Yeah.
That's the same Justin every time. So he says it in the recording, but he actually doesn't need to. And he's just wasting breath.
Which has been fun. Anyways, that's been fun too, actually, because you're able to do these repeating bits that we have, and sometimes I should also mention while we're recording, initially, John, I'm just going to switch back to me for a sec so folks can see we're having a conversation. We need I guess talking heads. Here we go. So initially, we were trying to make everything perfect in while we recorded. So I would be like always jumping in after, if there's any pause. My co-host John really thinks, and so sometimes he'll take a long time to answer, and I would be like jumping in and trying to talk all the time. And then we realized if you have an editor, they can just take that stuff out. And so, and sometimes we'll talk to Chris directly. We'll say, hey, Chris, just add in a little something here. And Chris has been great for that too. So we try not to have too many of those. Like our show doesn't require a lot of editing. It's, Chris is taking out any big pauses, maybe I mess up on an ad read and I'll do it twice and I'll get him to remove the first one. But other than that, it's leveling, cleaning up the audio, removing a few big gaps, and inserting our theme music.
I was going to say, so if you want to, you can flip back. This would be like the finished version now of the previous episode. And so there's a few little things going on here, Logic Pro and other apps. It's not tied to Logic, but you can put chapter markers in. So I've been doing that just for fun. I don't think you guys aren't even You don't need to pay me to do that, but that's just for my own sake.
Yeah, that's been awesome. You folks should definitely pay Chris to do that. The chapter markers is something a lot of people have mentioned, and I'm trying to think of the easiest way I could show you what that looks like in Build. So in Apple Podcasts, this is what it looks like. And if I scroll up, you can see, well, those are show notes. Hold on. We have chapters
Justin likes
here.
a lot of show notes.
Yeah, I've got a lot of show notes. But these chapters, so people can jump right to this part of the show, and it'll play just at that chapter marker. And we've had a lot of comments from folks like that is a feature they really like. And so if you want to stand
hardcore
out,
podcast nerds love that.
yeah,
For sure.
But now it's built into a lot of the popular players.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's like it is a relatively simple edit for when it's two people talking, but there is still like, you can see these little like volume adjustments and then I cut out just to like make sure that there's nothing that I forget about that. Like, so John talks there and then Justin talks for a long time and John says something. Well, there's a John bit. Like you actually got a good full, whatever that is. I don't know.
Yeah. See, I'm
like a minute. Almost.
A minute. See, we're doing well.
But yeah, so there's editing, and then basically I bounce it. But I actually you brought up Marco Arment. I use his tool. So it comes out of Logic as a big uncompressed WAV file, and then his tool, which one is that? Build Your SaaS 22. His tool then throws, you can see right away the chapters, titles are all there. And it's actually like, this is a free tool called Forecast that Marco Arment built for himself and then has released it. So it throws your artwork in and podcast title, episode title, if you know it, summary. And this is just for podcast players that don't already pick it up from the RSS feed that, say, if you host it with transistor.fm, just as an example. Where they build your RSS for you, and then all the show details are pulled in from that. Whoops. I keep wanting to flip back to like our chat, but I guess all the details are pulled in from that RSS feed, and that's where it pulls the details from for what it shows you in the player. But if there wasn't anything there, then you could also do it here, and then this would override that. I think John could probably tell me more about what's going on there. But
yeah, so if these meta tags are in your MP3 file when you upload it to Transistor, we'll keep these. If you're missing anything, we'll put it in for you after. Right.
So this is really handy because it'll actually remember like your episode number. It'll pull that from your file, and you can actually put, for each chapter, you can also put an image if you really want to, and a link. So like in this case, ProfitWell sponsored the episode. So if somebody happens to be looking at I don't know if it actually works in the Apple Podcast Player, you should switch back to grab your phone there and see if it actually works. It's been a while since I've used the Apple Podcast app.
If what works?
So like tapping on the chapter, and then there should be in like Pocket Cast, I know you can actually click a little link icon, and it'll. What does this do? A person can actually link or click the link from their player.
Oh, interesting! It just jumps to that part in the podcast player, in Apple Podcasts, and in Overcast. What does it do in Overcast? I'm not sure.
I would guess Overcast supports it.
Ken Wallace was asking, what's the name of that tool? So the tool that Chris was just showing us is Forecast, right?
Yeah.
And then you edit in Logic Pro.
Forecast. If you Google it, it should be at Marco Arment's. Like I think it's at his overcast.fm/forecast maybe is the URL.
Okay.
So.
Cool. Now I want to just see what the chapters do on. So on Overcast, the chapters are here, and if I click this, I think if I
can't see it, or I can't.
Oh, you can't. It's in. Oh yeah. See, there is a clickable link in Overcast. So
maybe it's just Apple Podcasts. It doesn't.
Yeah. So if you have sponsors, that's a great. Another great kind of value add there.
Yeah, and I've mentioned like with other clients, I've told like the sponsors aren't savvy enough or aware. Like they're not that they're not smart, but they're just like they're just catching on to like podcasts being a great medium to sponsor, and like they want they're still web page oriented very heavily, and so the podcast player itself is a very secondary, third or whatever kind of down the line as far as awareness of it being a space to like throw links in and tracking and all that kind of stuff. So, but you could really easily, if your podcast that you have is, you have a lot of podcast player savvy people. I don't know if that makes sense, but where you throw like a link in here and put whatever, some sort of tracking .php thing or whatever on the in the player.
Yeah.
Then you can quickly find out how many people actually click from there versus click from your website, and kind of like target that differently maybe, or whatever you want to do. So not that I'm in favor of tracking and targeting, but it's good to know the data.
Cool. So after this part here, I'm going to show my desktop again. Chris will get us the file back.
And by the way, that takes me like 16 hours of just straight, like I'm just sweating. My kids don't see me for days. That's what this is.
Chris is really working hard. But the part that I love is again in our shared Dropbox folder. We have another folder called Finished Episode Files, and we'll just drop all of the finished episode files right here. So I can just grab the newest one, and at this point, I head over to Transistor, and I'll choose the audio file and upload it, and then I'll start putting in our show notes and everything in here. And for me, the great part is that for John and I, we record the show, we put our files in Dropbox, and then we just wait for Chris to edit it, and then when it comes back, all I have to do is upload it, add our show notes, and publish, or schedule in this case. So if you are getting overwhelmed with the editing of your show, I highly recommend that you hire an editor like Chris. And do you have some openings right now?
Yeah, still have some openings. It's one of those things. It's a weird business that like is heavily word of mouth based as far as referrals and things like that. And there's a bit of like social traffic and stuff but yeah, word of mouth helps a ton. And so feast and famine, like any client business sometimes. But so if you're all curious about how it works or whatever, feel free to hit me up. lemonproductions.ca is the website, contact form on there, or I'm iChris on Twitter, and happy to chat podcasting on there. And just if you have questions, pricing, how it all works, whatever, all that kind of stuff, happy to talk through that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and the way that we one interesting thing for John and I is and now I'm seeing if I can actually show this, because I was originally in the camp of, no, I have to do it all myself. It's going to cost too much money. It does not. I mean, it's a little bit of an investment, right? How much is it generally per episode? Do you have a standard rate, or
like $80 to $100 per episode?
Okay, so $80 to $100 per episode. One thing that John and I were able to do was start a Patreon, and this Patreon does $300 a month. And so between this and a few sponsors, we have enough to pay Chris for the editing and the hosting if we had to pay for the hosting of our podcast. And this, I think, is within reach for a lot of shows. And the other thing we found was that this giving people the goal of saying, hey, we've hired an editor, it's going to cost us about $400 a month. And if you could help us get to the point where we could pay the editor, that would be amazing. It gave a public challenge for that. And so the saving of the time, being able to produce a better quality show, being able to focus just on creating the show and not having to edit the show has been huge for us. So it is a bit of an investment, but I think if you're at the point where you have an independent podcast and you're at around 500 listens per episode, I think that's probably a good time to make the switch and hire an editor. If you're if you're producing a corporate podcast for a company, I mean, a lot of those shows can have value even if they're only getting 100 downloads per episode. You should definitely hire an editor. Do not do it in-house. Get someone who knows what they're doing, and Chris can do that too. Are you able to say who you edit for some other shows? Is it public?
Oh, yeah.
You edit for Shop Talk, right?
Yeah, Shop Talk Show, CodePen Radio, Untapped. So it's a beer network for. It's either you've heard about it because you drink a lot of beer,
or you've
never heard of it. But Untapped, they have a Drinking Socially podcast. That's actually awesome. Even if I'm not like a huge beer drinker, but it's fun to hear them talk about the art of it. And somehow they managed to drink 2 really strong beers and still maintain a good podcast. What else?
Chartable.
Yeah, Chartable Radio. He's been a little quiet. You got to go bug Dave.
I know. I've got to get him to record some more episodes.
Yeah. So, and Dave, he's connected to really random people.
Yes.
I haven't started officially. I can't talk yet about who, but like, all of a sudden I get an email from somebody who's like, "Wait, Dave, you just CC'd me with this person, and like, do you know who that is?" And he's like, "Yeah, I know." So yeah. Anyway. But Maintainers Anonymous is actually, if you're a code nerd, Henry Zhu is like behind Babel, which apparently is like this massive thing that like Facebook uses, but I'm not a coder, so it doesn't mean anything to me. But and he's got a couple podcasts, and Real Talk JavaScript is from like some Microsoft guys, and all sorts of stuff.
That's great. Yeah, so definitely hit Chris up, lemonproductions.ca, if you're looking for an editor. We've been recommending him to all of our customers too. And if you have questions, actually there's
if
one
there's
more
any podcast questions, I'd happily answer too.
Yeah,
for
there's
anybody
one
who's interested in starting or doing it.
One question that we got while someone was watching here was, let me just switch, he's saying, does that rule of thumb for distance from mic, does that vary from mic to mic? It probably does actually, because you're quite close to your mic right there.
So like I have a pop. I don't know if you can see, right? Like I have a pop filter on it, and so I use that as a guide, just like to keep myself from like eating the mic. But you could have the gain cranked up. Like I don't have a really. I need to put together get a better preamp thing here, but. And so you could have the gain. I know people. This is the Heil PR40 microphone that lots of people have, and they'll often have it like way down here.
Yeah.
And it still picks them up just fine. I'm in a place where there's a lot of room noise and air conditioners and echo, and so I like to have it closer so that it's not picking up as much reverb and echo right now. It's kind of just a rough guide to like make sure you're not chewing. It's more for like stopping people from getting too close, because even right now you're not actually anywhere near that with your microphone, and people I think I'm hearing you okay. Hopefully they're hearing you okay.
Yeah.
And so it's not like it's a hard fast rule, but just kind of like a guide to like if you're wanting to.
When I record the podcast, I have the same mic, but I have a pop filter in front of it, and I'm pretty close.
Right.
On video, I just back up and turn up the gain, and it seems fine. We had another question. This is Dominic. He's saying, I'm currently trying to edit my first episode ever and currently removing ums and ahs. This is so long. Is it something you're all doing?
That's like the magic question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
and you have a philosophy on this though.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you get, just time. If this is your first episode, it was Dominic, did you say?
Yeah, Dominic. Yeah.
Yeah. So good job. First of all, just recording something, period, and then having the guts to like listen back to your own self is painful enough for most people, and that's where they stop and they're like, screw this.
Yeah.
I hate hearing my own voice. Nobody else is going to like it. So
he mentioned
good job
that
on
too,
that.
actually.
Yeah. And I think that's like a big hurdle for a lot of people. It was for me. It still is for me. And so, but yeah, like how precise to edit the ums and ahs and things. I generally go with like the idea of like, you're just like Justin and I are talking in your natural conversation, there's going to be the occasional and ah and pause. And I think where possible, you leave some of those in because it gives the listener a chance to process what you're saying as well. Because if you're just like rapid fire and there's no breaks, there's no pauses between each of you, then it's like, I just did an there. Mm-hmm. And you don't notice it when you're listening to people normally talk anyways. It's just part of normal cadence of a conversation. And so But obviously, if you're like every second word is an and probably if you're doing this for the first time, you might have way more ums than you realize you even say, and you'll start to say them less as you edit yourself more, just because you'll hear it and you're like, oh, I gotta stop, and
Yeah.
there, I just did another one. But if you're editing yourself too, Dominic, and other people, like the one thing to remember is if you're recording yourself and then you're editing yourself, I don't know why it took me like 20 episodes of my own solo show to learn this, but like you can just stop and wait until your brain catches up and you have another thought to say. Like if you're doing a solo show or maybe you're with a friend, you're just like, because Justin and John do this all the time too. Where like Justin's like, okay, wait, Chris, cut this part out. I'm just trying to think of what I'm trying to say here. It's going to come to me. Wait, and then he goes on to the sentence. And obviously the finished product is, because of what I'm doing on the edit, nobody hears that. Nobody knows that he did that. He sounds way smarter than he is. He's a smart guy, but
That's why I'm paying you. That's why I'm paying you right there.
but yeah. So don't feel bad about that. But like again, the original question, edit out a few, but leave the occasional one in. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like we're not editing it so tight. There's no breaks or pauses or any sort of breath.
Yeah.
Kind of like having white space on a web page, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think you'll eventually, I think you should listen back to your own show, even if it is painful. Even if you listen to John and I's first episodes, well, first of all, John wasn't talking very much because I wasn't letting him. So I had to listen back to the episodes to hear, oh man, I'm really talking over him quite a bit. And you will start to recognize the annoying things you do, and then you just have to work at removing them. And sometimes for me, it is about being thoughtful, like this episode, I'm going to say, less. So, hey, and sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. But I think when I ask broadcasters about this, they say, when you're on the mic, you should just be a better version of yourself. And so sometimes that just means having this kind of mental idea of, okay, I'm speaking clearly, still conversationally with, in my case with John, but I'm going to try to be deliberate about what I say. And if I need to even take a moment and go, okay, just hold on, Chris, I got to collect myself. All right. Because a lot of the a lot of that, especially if you do it a lot, is because you're trying to collect your thoughts. And so it's better to just stop and then kind of go from there.
Because you can edit that out later.
And
that's, yeah. Even if you're on a podcast too, or if you're being interviewed, or the one I hear a lot, that obviously from when I hear a guest on a podcast who's a professional speaker, or like a web developer, let's say, who does a lot of talks, they'll often, when someone will ask them a question like, what do you think about PHP versus whatever? And then they'll say, their first thing will be, that's a really good question. And then go into the thing, rather than just like, I think blah, blah. And your brain hasn't caught up yet to like what you're actually going to say and why you'd say that. And they kind of have that as a filler to like give their brain time to like process what it's actually going to say. Yeah. And just having some of those filler words but not relying like so much that you say it a lot, like, because that's all, like you're saying, that's what an and an and a like is just like those filler words, but having maybe more refined filler words.
Yes.
is one tactic.
That is actually a good idea of when someone asks you a question, even in a co-host situation, just rephrasing it. Oh, so what is our feeling towards the recession? Well, it gives you time to kind of think through what you might respond. And yeah, I think there is something about that. Is there something that other co-hosts do that you think that John and I could learn from?
Now you're putting me on the spot.
All you got to do. You got to restate the question.
There's almost like that's a really good question, Justin. There is almost, the more I think about it, there is a dynamic often that seems to come out in a lot of like I'm trying to think through all the like co-hosty based, like two-person hosting based podcasts.
Yeah.
Where like even say Shop Doc Show is Chris Coyier and Dave Rupert, and Chris Coyier is a very dynamic, strong personality. he doesn't, like, to his credit, he just, and especially in a podcast when you're talking over Skype, you can't always be like polite, because you don't know that the other person is done necessarily, and especially if it's not video, you don't know. And so you just gotta, if you start talking, you just gotta plow ahead and keep going, even if they actually were gonna start talking. And so that's more his style. Dave's a little more chill, more like the John, I guess, of that relationship.
Yeah.
And talks less for sure than Chris does, and all that kind of stuff. And I think there's a bit of that dynamic and it's okay to have those two roles. I think, like, to stress over, like, if you've got a co-host and you're worried, like, maybe it's your show and you want a friend to do it with you. It's okay if one of you is more dominating in a healthy way, I guess, if that's such a phrase. But and recognizing your roles, like the thoughtful Buddha, John, literal Buddha, John, versus the more dynamic, like, whatever's coming down the brain pipe to the tongue is Justin. And so it's okay to have that dynamic and kind of recognizing your strengths and weaknesses there. And so I think for you and John, like that too, like, when I'm editing, I don't know how you're feeling. Like, I don't know if John is going to watch this or listen to this, but like, sometimes I'm like, okay, John, just like spit it out, get it out. You're like, and then other times I'm like, okay, Justin, just shut up and like let John speak or whatever. And so you're like, and I'm sure the listeners are similar, like, where it's just like, I know John has like the exact answer to what Justin is trying to like land on, but Justin won't stop talking long enough for John to like get the answer out or whatever, right? And so I think that's natural, and I don't know.
Yeah, but like, that is something we got to learn. I think we got to learn to do better. Is the first step was definitely me just giving him space to speak, and being okay with, if there's a 40-second silence, Chris is going to hear it.
Yeah.
And he's going to edit it out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If it's really awkward pause, like, actually a client I just talked to on the phone, they were like, there's a pause, and I was like, I wasn't sure if the podcast had stopped. If it's ever like that, then like, okay, because you don't want people like sort of freaking out a bit and like thinking their podcast player broke or the episode is over suddenly and they missed it. And because they're not always, as much as you might think they are, obviously they're not like sitting and listening intently to every single word that you say and like anxiously awaiting what the next thing is that's going to fall off your mouth.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't want them to like completely disappear from your player, but yeah.
We've got a question from Noah here. He says, is it okay to not edit at all? Just throw in an intro and call it a day.
I guess it depends what your goals are with your podcast. And I'm of the mindset that I'm just pumped, just like we were talking about with Dominic earlier. Mm-hmm. I'm pumped that someone's doing a podcast, and like, good on you, do it. Because to me, this is personally, the hardest part was actually just putting it out into the world, regardless of what quality was. Just hitting publish and sharing that with somebody was like a huge hill to climb for me. And so I always celebrate that in other people. Like, if you're just willing to do that, hit record and publish it, that I think is a huge step for a lot of people. And so I never want to stomp on that. That said, a lot of people can benefit from editing. And if you think you can't, you probably maybe need to be a little more aware of yourself, because chances are there's stuff, whether it's content wise or vocal tics, or like we were saying, too long of a pause, or sound like, a lawnmower going off in the background or whatever. All those kinds of things you can always benefit from a bit of editing. But just like anything else, just like if you're writing a blog post, like, you could sit there and edit forever and refine it, send it to 1,000 people to get their feedback and whatever. But at some point you have to hit publish, and then it's out. So.
Yeah. I think that's it. And I think there are a few shows I know where they don't edit. They just go straight to tape and then they upload it. They're actually not bad. The one thing I've noticed is when you don't have an editor, like, a lot of their stuff sounds blown out because they're not, their recording settings probably aren't right.
Yeah.
And for me personally, the advantage, and we hired Chris once just to see what it would be like. And I think the biggest benefit was just the mental anxiety I used to have of, oh, am I doing this right? Does this sound right? Was just gone, because then I can just entrust Chris, who does this for a living, and edits all these other shows and has seen tons and tons of other sound files. Like, he knows what to do. And so I think that benefit for me, that was the big benefit for me. And you can try it out. I mean, it would be $100 investment to get Chris to edit an episode and then see if you like it.
Yeah, and that's like, it's not a long-term I'm not, at least at this point, I can't speak for if you're watching this 5 years from now somehow. Maybe, hopefully by then I'll figured out a better business plan to get richer. But yeah, like, it's definitely, we obviously, you don't get the same level of care and familiarity that you do with consistency of doing like over and over. And that's it like anything else, it gets better each time because I get more familiar with your voice and your tone and the way you like to edit and what you don't like and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, but definitely it's a fun thing to try out and experiment with. I think the other thing too is that none of us very few of us podcasters are professional voice recording experts, studio engineers, not engineers, but like voiceover experts, where we're consistent with how we talk into a microphone and even the levels. And as you talk and you get more excited and then you're running out of breath and then the volume gets lower and all those kinds of things can be adjusted by the editor. And you don't have to worry about it when you're recording. And if you don't edit at all, like Justin said, I think you miss out on some of those things where it does frustrate the audience. Lots of them will keep listening. Nobody's going to unsubscribe or shut it off necessarily, but it just becomes a frustration point because they have to reach for their radio, turn it up, and then all of a sudden your co-host comes in blasting, way too loud. And
yeah,
that's the kind of stuff that either you editing or someone editing for you would fix generally, hopefully.
If you are doing a multi-person, multi-track show, for sure, I think you need to hire an editor because it's just leveling two separate people, sometimes recorded over Skype. And it's very difficult to get it done well and then to have everything sync up. Sometimes you can have this audio drift, which is really annoying, where gradually over time, your audio track gets longer and your co-host is the same. And so having someone who can track that for you and just keep their eye on it is... Yeah, and also just having a third party that can sometimes, I just asked Chris for some feedback. It's nice being able to do that because sometimes your listeners are just gone. They kept hearing you jiggling your microphone, and they were like, I got to get out of here. This is annoying. But your editor would be able to tell you right away, like, do you realize your microphone's making all sorts of noise? So
Yeah, that's actually, and like part of that is that feedback loop that getting comfortable with in this case, the client, like you guys. I had another, like with someone on Copen Radio too. She was like, she didn't realize she was like bonking her elbows on the table or something. And so I'd hear this like dunk, dunk. And like we couldn't figure out what it was. And then all of a sudden she went back and started recording again. And she's like, oh, it's my elbows. Because she doesn't hear it necessarily loud enough in her own headphones to know it's picked up on the recording. And so, yeah.
Totally.
All sorts of fun stuff. Yeah.
So thanks for doing this, Chris. A lot of folks have been asking about podcast editing and what it's like to work with an editor. I think some folks don't realize that, it's a little bit of money, but it's actually not as much as you might think. It's not thousands of dollars to edit a show every month. It's, hundreds of dollars. And that could be the difference between you creating a show at all and getting it out. And it could also be the difference between you just having a show that people want to listen to. So definitely worthwhile. Again, if you want to get a hold of Chris, I'll just show you his contact info again. This is lemonproductions.ca/contact. And on Twitter and basically everywhere, Chris is iChris. So the letter I, Chris. And you can get a hold of him there.
Cool. Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.